Hi, everyone. So, can you hear me? Okay. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming to the seminar. I'm very excited about our special guest today. This is Matt Buszko, or Buszko. He is one of the team from the city that is working on achieving our goal of zero waste. And he's going to tell you a lot more about that and about composting. So I met Matt this summer, the Creation Justice Group. We were going to do an event in September that ended up getting canceled because of a hurricane, but we met in front of Matt and a couple other people from the city and someone from the, what's your group, Connie's group, that Master Gardeners. Yeah, we're all outside of GFAA, and they were looking at like every little weed, the little things in the cracks of the sidewalk. They knew the name of it, and they were like, "Oh, this one's good. Oh, this one's bad. Oh, this is good." I mean, they're amazing. So we have experts from the city taking care of helping us take care of our planet. So help me welcome Matt Buszko. And just want to remind everyone, if you don't speak in the microphone, then the people on Zoom can't hear you. Okay? So.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the very, very lovely, kind welcome. My favorite thing is being lumped in with experts. So then it's like I get to seem like an expert by proximity, but really it was all the wonderful master gardeners folks that were identifying weeds and stuff. I'm just like, what's this? What's this? It's the green wall to me. So you perhaps are looking at this and you're like, hey man, I thought we were talking about composting. What have you done to me? Well, I've Trojan horsed you ever so slightly because I'd like to contextualize, and Holden, let me know if I need to be somewhere else or do something else. I'd like to briefly kind of contextualize our composting discussion within a larger frame of food waste, zero waste, what's happening in Gainesville, some problems, some solutions. And there's a couple of reasons for this. One, I think we don't necessarily, hold on, it's tripping me out when I'm standing too close to the thing. But I think one, we don't always know the scope of the problem, so it's good to just talk about it. I won't even call it the problem. I'll say where we are. So it's good to kind of see where everything is. Two, you may be eligible for some help with some things that you're not aware of. And then three, the things you do know about, you can go forth and kind of help educate everyone else and share this information with other folks the more we know about it. So we're kind of here to just share knowledge, share information. Food waste, you may not know it, is not nifty, in case anyone was wondering whether or not it's nifty. So this is, I managed to leave that part out. This is in Gainesville, Florida. I know this is like a lot of stuff in this picture here, but I think about my mom. My mom's a penny pincher to the extreme. She abhors waste, and she likes shopping at grocery stores, as many of us do. I think if my mother knew that that very grocery store where she's buying her eggs and her carrots and sweet potatoes and whatever also had all those exact same goods in the dumpster out back, she would flip. Which one would you ask? Okay, yeah, I'm not going to tell you where this is, but it's in Gainesville, Florida. So I, as a city of Gainesville employee, would never tell you to go look in a dumpster. I'm just saying, if ever you saw the inside of the dumpster, you'd be like, holy cannoli. Somebody, I'm not going to say who, one time went to one of these dumpsters here in town and found 12 dozen eggs, every single carton. Or let me ask you like this. You know, sometimes you go in the store, you should like take a peek in, make sure there are no cracked eggs. So you set aside the one with the cracked egg, and then so on and so on and so on. What do you think happens with the one with the cracked egg? So you're looking at it right there. Most of those cartons of eggs have 11 good eggs and one bad egg. Into the dumpster it goes. So I agree. It's super duper crazy. This is just another one where this is in our city. Now, you could say like, oh, well, who's going to eat these like outside cabbage leaves, right? Or something like that. But still, composting is a thing that could be done with that. And we have outlets for composting here in town. But these bananas are still completely good, perfectly fine. And the language of the protective kind of law, the Bill Emerson Good Samaritan Act says apparently wholesome food is able to be donated. That looks apparently wholesome to me. Getting the clicking. Nice. Again, this is just another one. Look at this, like perfectly fine, perfectly wrapped broccoli. Why exactly did this piece of broccoli end up in the garbage? I have no idea. There weren't any recalls at the time. It's something that's quite irrational and logical. And part of why I'm telling you about this is so you can be a little bit outraged about it, because I think it's a little crazy and I'm a little bit outraged. But there are some things that we're trying to do about it. So we're not just like sitting back like, oh no, heavens. The city of Gainesville has set a goal to go zero waste by 2040. Part of that is why I'm here. Part of that is why I have a job. And I'm going to talk about this a little more later on. But the reason this exists is because residents such as yourselves went to the city commission and said, hey, I'm tired of seeing all that junk in the dumpster. I'd like to see less stuff in the dumpster, less good stuff. So because of folks such as yourselves going to your local representatives and asking the local representatives to do better, we now at least have this zero waste goal by 2040. You might think like, oh, that's not really much. We're one of a few cities in the state of Florida who even have these types of goals. The majority of cities are just like, yeah, whatever. Dumpster is fine. Incinerator is fine. So we're at least trying to look at it a little bit differently. We're trying to reduce the waste going to the landfill, and we're trying to improve diversion opportunities. Let's keep on. So one of the things I really like, and this is related more directly to composting, is, and back to this idea of the people asking their local representatives to do something for them. This is the Opus Airstream. If anyone goes there, they are now diverting their coffee grounds, not because the city ordinances, not because I came and tried to put pressure on them, but because people went there and asked them to do it. In this case, I don't know if you can see, it's the UF Organic Garden, and they set up a program where they're able to collect these grounds. So instead of these, like, I don't know, man, 200 pounds of coffee grounds, maybe more, going to the landfill every single week, now they're being put to good use right here in Gainesville, which, by the way, real quick, as we're talking about the landfill, where is the landfill? Like, where does your, if I throw a banana peel or coffee grounds in that trash can right there, where does it go? It goes to the landfill. It goes to the transfer station first, which is Levita Brown. It's on the edge of town, which, before I forget, you can totally request a tour of that place. Anybody can. You can see how the whole recycling thing happens. It's fascinating. You can see how much stuff gets sent to the landfill every day, and you're like, ouch. But where is the landfill? The New River landfill in Union County. So it's 35 miles away. So when I throw coffee grounds in that trash can in the back corner, a truck goes 35 miles to Union County, dumps it, locks it away in a coffin forever and ever. It doesn't really break down. As it does ever so slowly break down, it's in anaerobic, no oxygen conditions, and releases harmful methane. Alternatively, you could just have it go, 2 miles away and be composted and be used as a very valuable soil amendment. So sometimes we think, like, why don't we make the obvious choice? And part of it has to start with you guys telling the government what you want, the government saying, hey, we have this goal, we have these zero waste specialists, we're trying to promote waste diversion infrastructure. So yes, you can. Yes, I can't. I, as like a city employee, tried to go to this one coffee shop, and I'm like, you're going to set up this system. And they kind of did it for a little bit, but it kind of fell apart. My purpose in showing you both of these systems is that ultimately I really believe in people power. And people power is really what made it happen in community, which I think is probably a big thing that you guys are about here. Yes, sir. I will answer that by asking you this question. Where in your backyard or in your neighbor's backyard do you want a landfill? That's a fair point and a fair question that I don't know the answer to, except to say that NIMBY is pretty strong in all of us. And I don't want it necessarily in my backyard. You probably don't want it in yours. You put it 30, or you put it 15 miles away, someone's going to be like, whoa, whoa, not here. Something like that. So I don't have a simple, straight answer. The last landfill in Alachua County was closed. You guys could probably tell me better than I can. I don't know, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, or something like that. So we had like 4 in Alachua County, and they've all been closed and capped. Just real quick definitions: food waste, food scraps, wasted food. Food waste can be thought of as inedible parts of food. So coffee grounds, I don't know about you guys, I tend not to eat them. But wasted food is the stuff like those broccolis, those eggs, those bananas that we saw. That's perfectly edible food that is now wasted. There's a very, very fantastic person at the University of Florida who says waste is not waste until it's wasted. I love this oh so much. And I'm going to ask you, wonderful children, to please repeat this all with me one time. Waste is not waste until it's wasted. Fantastic. Beautiful. If we think about this very shirt right here, I can go throw it in a landfill and gone, it's wasted, right? But so long as it's here on me, it's a precious material. I can give you this shirt. You can continue wearing it. It has a second use. We can mend it. We can keep on using it. And if Gainesville had a meaningful textile recycling, you'd be able to actually recycle it and keep it as precious, valuable, useful material. Once you send it to the landfill, it then becomes waste. Waste is not waste until it is wasted. Our current system says waste everything, out of sight, out of mind. The zero waste by 2040 idea is to let's try to change that. I'm going to kind of skip over this a little bit, but 63 million tons of food sent to the landfill. There's really a staggering amount, and part of this is systems, because you might be like, why is this happening? They're just systems. If at your house all you have is a trash can, or even we'll look right here, if all we have in the corner of this room is a trash can, it doesn't matter whether in your hand you have a banana peel or an aluminum recyclable can or a baby diaper, they're all going in that thing. This isn't me singling out you. This is me just showing all of us, the most conscientious, the most aware people. In the absence of a perfect system, we will do imperfect things, and then we will waste material. We as a whole do a whole lot of that. 2.3 million people facing hunger, a lot of hungry children, unfortunately. And this is kind of what I was alluding to earlier, is we emit methane. So sending the banana peel to the landfill is generating methane. Now, to be completely fair, the New River landfill does have some systems in place to try to capture some methane, but this is like, trying to catch grains of sand on the beach in your hand. You'll get some for sure, but most of it is going to be left behind. I should have said like some punchline things, so I could have taken a sip there. Can we play? This is back to like, wow, there's so much food getting thrown out. We're just going to watch a quick little thing, 2 minutes, where a guy can explain it much better than I can. If Holden is able to click on that for me. And if you'll move it to the 34-second mark, please. We're going to watch a bunch of ads on YouTube first. Yeah, perfect.
Or Best Buy, or Union Buy, or even the magnificent, more wholesome, great taste served before date stamps below. But all of these expiration date labels have one very important thing in common. They have nothing to do with whether the food is actually expired. That's right. These so-called expiration dates on your food are not and have never been about whether your food is safe to use. And this is not just like the Rooney get off my lawn opinion. It's the official position of these safety-loving dorks at both the FDA and the USDA. The date you see on packaging is usually just some guy's best guess at when you're going to have the optimal taste experience. But the mere presence of a date on food packaging leads to 84% of consumers and 100% of grocery stores throwing away perfectly good food because a box told them to. While listening to a charismatic boss can sometimes be a perfectly fine choice, in this case, misleading expiration dates are a major contributing factor in the United States, wasting 40% of our total food supply. Yeah, 40 with a D. Of all the food that gets grown or imported in the United States, we don't eat almost 40%. And the vast majority of that gets trucked to a landfill where it piles up, ferments, and turns into methane. And not to get too climate changey on you, but methane has a bad habit of going off into the atmosphere where it lives the rest of its life as a greenhouse gas that traps heat 80 times more than carbon dioxide. And if that doesn't do anything for you, here's a stat. 2% of the US GDP goes to grow food that does not get eaten. Yeah, we're wasting the entire GDP of a country that goes here. Every year, the United States is growing and then wasting an entire Norway in food, or an ironic free Hungary. And to be clear, it's not just expiration dates. Food waste is happening all over the place. The EPA is sufficiently freaked out by the emissions and toxic.
Fun. Super duper fun. So you might be thinking I already knew some of this, but maybe there are parts that you didn't know, and it's just a staggering amount. And again, if I can try to bring it back to systems and to come back to that zero waste by 2040 thing, this is for all of us. And businesses are the biggest contributors to, let's say, just to the landfill. They're the biggest generators of waste. You guys are not Walmart, probably. You're not Mr. or Mrs. Costco. So that is the lion's share. And so that's part of where we can go, hey, businesses, can you please try to like cut it out a little bit, do a little bit better? But there's also room for us individually to take actions such as supporting certain businesses or composting our food waste. Are we back on the clicker? Yeah. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this, but the reason why I wanted to show you this is because I found it kind of fascinating when I first was made aware of it. And we see here that in the last category, the avoid, the send down the drain, landfill, or incinerate. I think a lot of people, especially if you have garbage disposals at your house, you think sending stuff down the drain is perfectly fine, a perfectly fine way. Like, I'm not sending it to the trash can. Well, you're putting it into this system that requires a whole lot of transportation energy, a whole bunch of chemicals. That same system where your bathroom water goes is also the same system where your coffee down the sink goes. So the same level of treatment that your bathroom water is going to get, so too does your leftover stale coffee get, right? So that's a whole lot of stuff that's an unnecessary process for, let's say, that stale coffee that you could just pour out into the dirt. And then also the solids that are left over are not necessarily going to get land applied. They still may get sent to the landfill. You're not guaranteed 100% of, let's say, applesauce or something, that it gets land applied, which is what they do with a lot of like biosolids, the things from the bathroom waste, human waste. And so, yeah, it's just like, don't put stuff down the drain. And while composting, there's not a laser thing on here, is there? I can do it there. Anyway, so composting is a fantastic thing, but composting is not the highest and best use of these things, right? So this is part of why I'm contextualizing. I love composting. I think it's the niftiest thing in the universe. So in a way, it broke my heart to see this. I'm like, compost would be like number one. No, actually, if you can feed animals, that's ideal. If you have neighbors with chickens or hogs or something like that, that's the place to go. If you can take your apple cores, so I don't actually, I do eat apple cores, but if you just eat the apple from the bottom, you can like eat the whole thing. The core is a lie. Tell everyone. But anyway, most people don't eat apple cores, but the one above feed animals and below prevent wasted food, it says donate or upcycle. I can't donate my apple cores to you, but how can we upcycle apple cores? Anyone? Sure, dogs, that's still feeding to animals. That's fantastic. You could dry it. Fantastic. So for the Zoom audience, the question was essentially, or the statement was essentially, I have a deck, I live in the woods, I can just sort of chuck my food waste out to the forest and kind of, I have avert the landfill that way. I would say, yeah, sure. It's probably not perfect, not ideal for all of us. And it depends on your conditions. Like if I live in an apartment and I like throw it on your front doorstep, you might not like that. But if I have the space, there is a question of maybe whether I'm introducing too much, like apple cores specifically, probably not a huge deal, but let's say I'm dumping out a bunch of cooked oil or something. Well, now I'm introducing a whole lot of concentrated something into the atmosphere that the correct microbes and enzymes that would break that down kind of can't handle it. So I'm still like polluting, even though it's just my leftover food scraps. But anyway, like vinegar. Anyone ever drunk vinegar or apple cider vinegar? guess what? Like it can be made from. It can be made from apple scraps, apple cores. You can take apple cores, sugar, water, and time, like time, hours and days, and then you've just upcycled your food scrap. So you've given them additional use. Waste is not waste until it's wasted, right? Okay. What can I do about it? So if I can just ask, so I know that we have dogs that we can feed. In some cases, some food scraps, they call that guerrilla composting, by the way, when you just like kind of throw your edible plastic-free food stuff somewhere. I, as a City of Gainesville official or employee, will not make a statement about it, but it's not the worst thing in the world. What can I do about it? So can I ask someone to just give me a suggestion as to how you can prevent wasted food or donate or upcycle or feed animals or leave unharvested or compost? Anyone, if you want to raise your hand? How can we try to reduce a little bit of wasted food?
Because going to it, we hit the grassy spots and we would trip. So we on this wonderful composter, which now our neighbor has and maintains, but we have donation rights.
So
It's
you are
a
so
group thing on the corner of our street.
So you are composting with a neighbor, essentially. Fantastic. The Institute of Local Self-Reliance actually says that ideally you have backyard composting. In the absence of that, you have community composting. So while if anyone knows about like Beaten Path Compost here, we have these like larger scale community composters. There are programs where they can pick up food waste from your home, either for a fee, anywhere, pretty much anywhere in the city, or the City of Gainesville has a special pilot program, which you can see if you're eligible. We can talk more about that later. That's fantastic. But actually, ideally, you and 3 of your neighbors compost together, and then there's 0 carbon emissions involved. So while Stefan and Beaten Path Compost is fantastic, I admire and adore them. Chris Kano, the giants on whose shoulders Beaten Path stands, and the Gainesville Compost that used to pick up by bike 10, 15 years ago, they're really fantastic. They're amazing. But anyway, I'm not going to get too much into that, but community composting is fantastic. Anyone else? Any suggestions on what we can do to avoid food waste?
I am now a single person, so I'm not cooking for a family of 4 to 6 people anymore. And so what I do is I actually plan out my meals and figure out what am I going to consume. And then if I do make a larger quantity, put it in the freezer. And again, like you said, share with friends, make the best use of the food that you have. Don't buy a lot of stuff just because it's on sale unless you have a very good plan for it.
Fantastic. I love composting. Should I compost or should I prevent wasted food in the first place? Right. So that's the purpose of this hierarchy. Are you going to be perfect all the time? Of course not. Have my wife and I had to compost like stuff that we accidentally overbought? Of course, but we do our best to try to keep this in mind as we make all our decisions. Yes, sir.
So yeah, I was going to say similar to that, only buy what you need and maybe also cook more at home than eating at restaurants. So maybe, is that right?
That's fantastic. I think that's
Bananas. So be very creative. When the bananas and strawberries go ripe faster than you think, well, there's strawberry jam and there's banana bread. So
yes. I love that very much. Anyone who wants to give me banana bread, I will accept it. But as a city employee, you can't be worth over $25. Then you'd be like bribing me. Keep that in mind. $26 of banana bread, I say no.
I had an implied question. Are restaurants more or wasteful with food waste because they have to be for safety reasons?
Interesting asterisk about do they have to be for safety reasons. I would say it's a sort of complicated. So the shortest answer is they are more wasteful. The more complicated answer comes back to that prevent wasted food thing. If you go to a buffet and you go like you're at a hotel or whatever, right? And you come up to that tray of bacon and it's empty, how you feel? You feel slighted. You're like, what the heck? The average person, right? You might understand. You're like, oh, I understand. They're trying to conserve food waste. But most of us are like, ugh. So the business of feeding people and hospitality generally says if there are like 100 people coming, I got to make sure like 100, 110, 120 are fed. So seems to be the case, even though there's going to be attrition, like not as many people come as what are signed up. So they want to offer more. And you and I, so long as you and I are mad that they're out of stuff, they will keep on essentially overproducing. Yes, ma'am.
You can always make soup when your vegetables, they've been in there a little bit too long. And for years I love making soup, and I always freeze single serving containers for when you need a quick meal. But here's one that I don't know, you might find this pretty yucky, but we save chicken bones when we have chicken, and we freeze them, and then you can make a really nice broth out of that.
Yes. Yeah.
There you are.
I'm gonna vote for you. If I hadn't already voted, I would be voting for you. That's my favorite answer. Yeah. So much stuff can be upcycled. And I think if we go back to maybe more traditional ways of living before we had like solid waste, which is who I work for, and before we had the concept of trash cans where just all your stuff is out of sight, out of mind, we had to use things. Yes, ma'am.
I went with my granddaughter to Morningside Park, and they fed the animals, the little kids did, and the people there said, bring us your pumpkins after Halloween because the animals will eat them. So rather than, so that's a pretty good link right there.
Yes, that's a great answer. Definitely everyone go to Morningside. I don't think I have it with me, but I will direct you all when we're done to try to check out our social media, because we have some info now about community pumpkin drop-off sites that are open for the next 10 days or so. So it's totally free. It's the Alachua County in partnership with O-Town Compost, which is a new entity that's operating here in town doing food waste composting. There are places where you can take your food scraps if you're not able to compost at home. I have this info in a handout I'll give to you later. I'll give you my business card. You can ask me any questions you have. Again, to kind of come back, businesses can donate to Bread of the Mighty. So if you happen to work for a food waste or a food serving business, you guys can donate to Bread of the Mighty, most likely. If not, or if you don't want to, or whatever reason, you can go to foodrecovery.org. You and I cannot donate to Bread of the Mighty. We have to be like a business, you and I as normal residents, normal citizens. But if anyone is on Facebook, the Buy Nothing groups are phenomenal. Someone will go, hey, I have like 10 things of baby formula. Who wants it? And you can just get that. Gainesville free stuff, Gainesville free food. I'm not trying to promote any specific groups. I'm simply saying that these are several groups that are online, that are communities where people go, I have a thing I don't need. Does somebody want it?
You said we can't donate as individuals to Bread of the Mighty?
That's my understanding,
I
is
have
businesses can
I'm-
donate.
I donate a check each month, but also sometimes when I see a buy one, get one, it's something I know I'm not going to use. Or I've taken stuff by there. And you walk in there, they seem grateful, they take it. Maybe I don't think they throw it away. They've thanked me.
No, I think you're right. Thank you so much for clarifying. I probably should change this slide. If you have things like cans or unopened food, you are able to donate that. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Thank you so much. With things like foodrecovery.org, you cannot, as far as I know, as a private resident, you cannot donate to them. But as restaurants where you're able to have the sort of chain of custody, you're able to show where this food was and how it was preserved under the correct temperature. You could even donate things like prepared foods. So back to my buffet example, you made, meatballs for 1,000 people, only 100 showed up. Well, you have these these temperature kept things you're able to show. Foodrecovery.org will connect your business with someone who can come pick it up. Animal farmers, fantastic. I just had an event. I don't know if you guys have events here at the church every now and then, where maybe you have a lot of folks. I will segue us for just a second because it's neat and it's on my mind. There was a big event, 200-300 people, where they were like, hey, we need volunteers to do food running. And I was like, 200-300 people and they need volunteers for food. I'll sign up. But really, I Trojan horsed my way in there to try to feed some hogs, because I know 2 people at least who will come pick stuff up from you if you separate it for them. People in the community, they're like, fine, let's do it, no problem. Every person I asked to guess how much food waste we gave to the hogs, wildly underguessed. So from this event with 200-300 people, who cares to hazard a guess how many pounds of food waste was destined for the landfill that instead was given to some lovely little hogs? Any guesses? 40,000. No, that's a crazy high number. So actually it ended up being 191 pounds of food that would have gone to the landfill and instead was feeding some hogs. But if we go back, and that's free. So the venue that was holding that event didn't have to pay for that because a hog farmer came by to pick this up. And then eventually you and I could presumably eat those hogs, or even if we're not eating them because we're vegans, they get to live happy lives because they eat that food. To come back to that idea of that wasted food scale, what would have been even better would have been to donate the edible food to people, which I feel like there are definitely some outlets for that. If you have big events, we can talk about it more later as to ways to do it. I think I saw a hand somewhere. No. Okay. If you have any questions at any point, just please let me know. And then we have licensed food waste collectors, which I need to add to this list because there's also O-Town compost. And what licensed in this case means is, for example, if I come to your house and I say, if I come to your business, I say, hey, give me your food scraps, you don't know what I'm doing with it. If you are operating in the city of Gainesville limits, you can register as a licensed food waste collector, which essentially gives us at the city the ability to tell you, the food waste generating business, that your stuff is actually getting composted. So it's a little bit of like regulation or assurance for you, right? So, and then there's an act that means that you can donate food. We have 200 tons of material sent to the landfill annually. Why is it material? Because it's not waste until it's wasted. This is perhaps one of the most important things that I can impart upon you today. Waste is not waste until it's wasted. Only a little bit is getting recycled. We could talk more about recycling later if you wish. I'm happy to do that because that's part of our jobs as well, is talking about recycling. There's yard debris, there's construction, demolition stuff. The reason I put the construction as the C and D is because that ends up being pretty heavy. And just if anyone was curious, you hear like state of Florida recycling goals, and it's like kind of high numbers. And then some counties meet those numbers. And you're like, really? You're diverting like, 70% of your waste? That's all like cans and bottles and stuff? No, it's like concrete. So like big, heavy things, and it makes the numbers really shoot up. No, I'm not trying to discount that. You should, those things should be recycled. Those are materials. But recycling is a funny thing because there's so much like optics, weird stuff about it. If anyone's curious, I know we're veering way off from food, but we don't have incineration here. Sometimes you'll hear the euphemism waste to energy. So they're able, in other places in Florida, other places in the US, they're able to burn your garbage and say that they're generating energy from it, which is true. But my understanding is it's not a net positive. So the amount of energy you're using to burn that garbage is offset by what you would gain. Basically, it's more, you're using more energy to burn it than you are getting from it. We don't actually do it here, but there are other places that do it and still call it recycling. Now, with the food waste getting composted, there's around 9 tons a month. This probably could be updated now. It's probably a little, that's probably close enough. We now have about 600 participants in the city's pilot program. That's this thing right here. And so essentially, I heard someone before talking about in Austin, Texas, where there are people picking up your food waste from your house on bicycle. We don't have that here on bicycle, but here we have a truck that does it. It's Beaten Path Compost is one of the groups that does it. If you live in one of 13 zones, if you've seen like the yellow buckets on the curb sometimes, that means that you are eligible to be in our free pilot program. If you have any questions about that, let me know later. And order. I love recycling. I love composting. It's fantastic. Oh, dang. There's so much more that we actually should be doing. So again, I just kind of want to contextualize all this stuff. We have some ordinances. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but I think it's valuable to know that part of the city's zero waste goal is to say, hey, food waste generating business, if you generate 1 cubic yard or more of organic material, it needs to be separated as food waste. That's pretty amazing. It's a pretty fantastic thing. We are the only place in the entire state of Florida that has this, essentially an organics ban. It's saying organics cannot be sent to the landfill. Astute, eagle-eyed observers are like, wait, Matt, you just showed me pictures of perfectly edible eggs in the dumpster. Something ain't clicking, right? The math ain't mathin', as the children say these days. And quite frankly, part of this is it's still relatively new. We don't quite yet have the level of enforcement that we'd like to see. And that could be a part of the thing where the people say, hey, elected officials, please make this happen. Please enforce this. I don't know. Who am I to say? And then this is kind of also saying that once you have that food, there's a hierarchy that you should go through. So composting, again, I love it oh so much. I think it's the best. I just spent a week at a compost training, super in-depth course. I can't get enough of it. Yet we have to understand it's not the best thing in the world. And so even to come back to that idea of like, hey man, why isn't the landfill closer than 35 miles away? Or if we think about like something like recycling, well, it's not really about that disposal being more convenient or even that recycling being more convenient. It's about trying to not have to recycle, not have to use the landfill. We're not going to be perfect about it, but we try to keep some of these things in mind and try to use them as guiding principles. Always opt for durables. And again, reuse is really where it's at. I just showed more pictures of garbage because I know lots of people who would like that trash can. I know all sorts of, if anyone goes to the Grow Gainesville meetings, it's like a lovely community of local gardeners and food growers and just fantastic folks who are, I don't know, kind of into saving the environment, I guess. They would love that 5-gallon jug. But instead, once that store sends that valuable material to the landfill, that's just waste. This is just another thing that like stores aren't, restaurants aren't supposed to give you single-use plastic, like accessories. So no straws. They're not supposed to just bundle your, let's say, takeout order with a bunch of like plastic forks and stuff, because you probably have those at home already anyway if you're getting takeout. So this is one of the ordinances that if you go to a business, this isn't the highest on our priority list for enforcement, but if you go to a business where they're consistently giving you plastic straws or plastic single-use accessories, you could let us know. I'll give you my contact info, and then we'll be able to go to the business and go, hey, can you please cut it out? This is against the ordinance. That's right. I'm not actually going to make you play this game, but there is a recycling game on our website that once you have the soda can or once you have the material, you couldn't avoid it. What do you do with it then? And there's some useful stuff on our website. Like when I mentioned before, the Levita Brown transfer station, anyone can go take a tour there. From before I started working this job, I went there a few times and I always felt like they give me the straight poop. And so I feel like my duty is to similarly give you the straight poop and to say like recycling is a complicated thing. The 100% of the eligible materials that make it into your, let's say, curbside blue and orange bin do actually get recycled. There are two places where things get a little bit funny, and they're both kind of one and the same. One is you go like, hey, what about those berry boxes from the grocery store? No, not recyclable. So it's things that we think ought to be recyclable that aren't. And so then if you give them to us, and it's not us, I'm with the city, the recycling is a county thing, but they just have to throw that stuff out. There is no use for it. There's no end market for it.
Okay.
And then the other thing that's sort of related to that is manufacturers don't have an eye on the recyclability of a material. So they put those little like triangle things with the number in it. And like, if I had a penny for every time somebody went, but it has the thing on it, it has the recycling logo, I would be a very rich man. That little logo thing has nothing to do with the product's recyclability. In Gainesville and Alachua County, we don't use the numbers. We go by basically form. Is it bottles, cans, jugs, jars, tubs? I'm happy to give you more of this info after, but anyway, there's a question.
Oh, I just want to ask, those berry boxes, are they not recyclable because of the shape of them, the structure, or is it the material?
It's the shape, it's the structure and the material.
Okay.
And so even though the material is like a #1 plastic, as are your water bottles totally recyclable. So even that number, that's why we say we don't use the numbers.
Right.
Because one #1 is good, another #1 is not good. And so it's the way that those berry boxes are made and basically the texture or the structure of that material.
Okay, because someone said, well, just cut the top off. That you're changing the structure, and I thought, well, that sounded weird to me, but
What's they say
it
if it's too good,
complicated.
if it's too good to be true, it probably isn't, right? Something like that. Unfortunately. Yeah, I wish it were the case. There's some things that we can't avoid. My go-to with that is, hey man, if I can go to the local market, if I can get a CSA with one of the local growers here, I can do my best to avoid those berry boxes. Sometimes you just want it, but
Yeah.
here at least I have a chance to get some of the local stuff. I see Dorothy, but I think I had another hand up somewhere here. No? Okay, Dorothy.
I was just curious about the lettuce boxes. are those also not recyclable?
What do you guys think? I see it. Unfortunately, they also are not. But thank you so much for asking. When I get those, because my wife and I have the 20-gallon trash can, the smallest one, what I sometimes do is if my wife is getting a lot of those, I'll like leave them by the trash can and at least stack them week after week. And then when I get like a bigger stack of them, I throw them out. But unfortunately not recyclable. And again, that's where I come back to the, if I can shop local, one of the benefits, one of the innumerable benefits is I can generally avoid packaging with shopping at local markets. Yes, ma'am.
I was going to say the strawberry baskets, the berry baskets can go to the farmer's market on 441, the county farmer's market, because a lot of the farmers have to buy those. And if you bring them back, you can also take egg cartons there too. I just did that this week. So yeah, the little green baskets. Yeah.
Very, very cool. I love that outlet as well. If we remember going back to this little hierarchy, recycling is nifty when you can recycle it, when you end up with it, but reuse is better. And so I love taking egg cartons to egg farmers. I've yet to see a single egg farmer go, ugh, I don't want this. They're all like, yes, yes, sir.
I've recently had questions about a zero, the triangle zero. It's a cardboard compostable item. Is that also recyclable? Also, I received some things in a shipment that these big what do you call the pulp manufactured type of protection for an item. And I wondered if that can be recycled. I did put it in recycling and they took it, but I don't know if it's recyclable.
Yeah, so I'll start backwards. If I put a car battery in that trash can, it'll get taken. But it's not supposed to go to the landfill. So the level, and I'm not going to get too much. There's a whole fascinating world nuance there, but I'm not going to get into that. I'm not actually familiar with zero. And I think so the triangle thing on plastic bottles, let's say, is called the resin identification code. And it's intentionally made to look misleadingly like the recycling symbol, though it has nothing to do with the product's recyclability. And so when they have like compostable things, I'm not sure exactly what the number on there would be. And I get the sense that that's not yet kind of completely fleshed out and finalized, meaning that it could be subject to change. But generally speaking, something that's compostable is no longer considered recyclable. And part of the reason why is because often it is contaminated with food waste. That makes it hard to recycle as paper. The other reason why is because generally things are all downcycled, with the exception, as I understand it, of like steel and aluminum, which is kind of, you melt it down, you make a new thing, you melt it down, you make a new thing. It remains good and viable. With paper products and plastic products, I guess the fibers get shorter and they're able to be made into weaker quality items or lower value items. Paper is fantastic because it can always end up as like toilet paper or napkins, right? So, but that's kind of the lowest end use. And so with the compostable stuff, my understanding is generally it's not compostable. Did I get everything or was there something else? Okay. So one last thing about the trash thing is some intrepid, probably very handsome person went digging through the apartments when people were moving out. Every single thing on here was trash from a dumpster, including a 55-inch smart TV from Samsung. And yeah, so this is just like, and it's really easy for people to go like, oh, this is just college kids, college students. No, it's not. They tend to generate more at the big move out time because they suddenly got to go. What are you going to do? When I was a kid, I was leaving the dorms. I had a beautiful coffee table, chucked it. Like, because I got to go, right? So I'm not trying to excuse it, but it's another thing that's interesting to think about, just the scope of these things. And lastly, here's like my contact info. If anybody's, wants to reach out or talk about any more of this stuff, please feel free to ask. Now you're thinking, wow, man, we've done all this stuff. We haven't talked at all about composting. We have a little bit, but so I'm going to briefly kind of talk about this process and talk about some things coming up where we could talk about composting even more, give you a chance to ask questions. And it's really about us in the community kind of sharing ideas, asking things, and providing support for each other. What I want to show you, this is kind of funny to do with a microphone. I bet that sounded wonderful for the Zoom people. That probably was also rough. So I'm going to need a beautiful, strong, brave, talented, awesome, intrepid volunteer to come up here and give me a hand with something. Excellent. Thank you so much, Jeff. So Jeff, what you have here is you have the start of your backyard compost pile. What do you see in here, Jeff?
It almost looks like soil. It's some fiber and paper perhaps, and I don't know what the dark stuff would be.
Would you say it's all like one mishmash, or it's kind of more like layers?
It's fairly layered, yeah.
Right. So we have this layered idea because ultimately with composting, all you're doing is you're doing a controlled decomposition process. So if anyone, you're farming microbes. If anyone has ever made kombucha or kimchi or yogurt or cheese or beer or wine or vinegar, all you're doing is you're taking a natural decomposition process and you're controlling it in the way that you want to. So this is what you're doing with composting. Instead of sending it to the landfill, you're saying, hey, microbes, come get some of this. The microbes like you and I don't want to just eat Snickers all day, or they don't want to just eat rice all day. They want a combination of different feedstocks, basically. And so we keep those in the proper proportions. That helps feed them and helps make the process as efficient as possible. However, an important asterisk here is at home, you're probably not going to create perfect compost. Jeff, I swear I need you in just a second. You're not going to create perfect compost at home, most likely. Most likely what you're going to be able to achieve is landfill diversion. You're going to take material and instead of turning your eggshells, banana peels, coffee grounds, onion skins into waste, you're going to keep it as material. Eventually it can become useful. It's just frankly at home, the volumes you're going to get and perhaps the level of work you want to put into it is not going to result in perfect, fast compost. That's totally okay. It's helpful to understand that. So I've experimented with both sides of it. I like being kind of active in the composting process and I get pretty good stuff as a result, but it's still not perfect and that's okay. So what we're going to do is Jeff here is going to take a scoop of food waste and he's going to dump it onto his compost pile. Look at him go. The man is a professional. My goodness, I chose the right volunteer. Beautiful. Now, as I mentioned before, the microbes don't want to eat just, let's say, potatoes all day, and they don't want to eat just steak all day. They want a combination. So here we have one ingredient. This is like the nitrogen or the greens or the wet material or the kitchen scraps, the kitchen waste. We're going to want to give them about 2 to 3 parts of the what are called browns. So it's like yard scraps, essentially. It can be dried up grass clippings. It can be dried leaves. It can even be things like twigs and sticks and even branches. So if you'll take 2 to 3 of those, please, and dump it on in here. Amazing. Thank you, Jeff. That's probably perfect. Everyone give Jeff a round of applause. Perfect. Jeff. Thank you so much, sir. You go sit back down. This amazing, complex, scientific demonstration was Jeff just making a backyard compost pile. Jeff just avoided the landfill. He saved the truck that 35-mile drive, 70-mile round trip, if you think about the empty truck coming back. And eventually, if he follows a certain method, he will get compost, a finished product, which is a beautiful soil amendment, which adds organic material to the soil, which is desperately needed, helps the soil retain all of its nutrients, helps the soil prevent runoff, and is a host to all sorts of life that actually keeps your soil healthier. Now, for me personally, I'm kind of a little bit split where I go, there's this like perfect composting method, there's efficiency, and that's going to require some time and some skill, and it's going to require volume. And then there's the landfill diversion method, which to me is really where it's at. When you're in a household of 2 and you're generating just a moderate amount of food waste, so just normal people that eat stuff, and sometimes you have, the cabbage core or banana peels or whatever, you're probably not going to have the volume, most likely, to get a hot compost pile. What happens is these bacteria that help to break this stuff down, they're thermophilic. It means they like the heat. And as they eat this stuff, as they eat your food waste and your wood waste, they generate tremendous heat. So this perfect, now at any point, anyone feel free to stop me if you have any questions, but this perfect compost system, which I'm not trying to be discouraging, you just probably won't do, because let's be realistic about what's going to happen. It requires a minimum for that microbial activity to really concentrate enough to start doing its work. It requires minimum dimensions of 3 feet by 3 feet by 3 feet. So you need at minimum a cubic yard of material, like Jeff showed us, of both the greens, right, the greens, the food waste. I have these ugly things on here, but I hide them because I don't like them. The greens, the food waste, and the browns, the yard waste or the wood waste. So minimum of a cubed yard to get that process really going. And then to really get like this perfect compost, you need to, so what'll happen is as the microbial activity increases, as they feed on this stuff, the core temperature will start to rise. That thing can get to 180 degrees Fahrenheit plus. It can start fires just from microbial activity. What is needed at a minimum for, like, now again, I'm talking about this like most perfect system, 131 degrees Fahrenheit, totally achievable, but 131 degrees Fahrenheit for 15 days. And throughout that 15-day process, what you're doing is every 3 days or so, you are turning the pile. Some people call aerating the pile, but turning is more accurate, because the aeration, just as a quick sidebar, as soon as you put, let's say I take this and I shake it all up, there's going to be an influx of oxygen. But as the tunnels and passageways sort of collapse, the overall level of oxygen in here is going to go from like the 21% that's atmospheric to like 10 to like maybe 5 fairly quickly. So it's not, when you're turning the pile, you're not so much aerating as much as you're just turning it and giving new material to the inside of the pile for the heat. But anyway, so that's that perfect method, 131 degrees at least. The plus side of that, if you're doing it, and I'm always happy to talk more in depth about how to make that perfect compost. But again, most of us just going to be the diversion thing, food waste diversion. Minimum of 131 degrees, 15 days. What's the benefit of that is now pathogens, E. coli, salmonella, if there's the possibility for those, which a huge asterisk is not super duper likely, because those protocols for reducing the pathogens actually come from the biosolids world, which is dealing with our human manure after the, our wastewater. So that stuff's really kind of toxic. So they need those high levels. But anyway, composting food waste has the same thing, 131 degrees, 15 days, turning it every 3 days. And after the end of that 15-day period, you're no longer seeing the pile get as hot. You're seeing that a lot of the material has broken down. It's now kind of unrecognizable. And then people let it cure or rest for typically another month or two. And then you start to have like arthropods and invertebrates come in and start feeding on the leftover material. So it's a super fascinating process of microbes coming in, getting it really hot, fungi coming in, helping to break it down further, and then things like roly-polies and earthworms continually breaking down. And it's almost, if you think about like the difference between a potato and a potato chip, right? That potato, which if you take out all the poor health implications, the potato chip has been processed. In this case, throughout the process, instead of the potato chip getting more and more toxic and poisonous, this stuff is actually getting more and more infused with life, with more available minerals and nutrients. And so this is becoming a better product as it sits longer. Do we have any questions at this point? Yes.
So I see advertisements on Facebook now for at-home composting machines that maybe cost $1,000. So I'm just wondering what your opinion is about something like that.
That's a great question. I would first like to ask if anyone else has any thoughts about that machine.
My neighbor got really excited about it, and then he realized that one of the machines, it composts it in, it looks like a little garbage can. It's very expensive, and you subscribe, and you can put all your waste in there, and then you put the pellets that it creates, put them in the mailbox, and it gets sent to a processing center where they make sure that there's no dangerous stuff in it, and then it's fed to chickens. So my neighbor came to me and said, wait, Francesca, you have chickens, so let's just skip that whole thing, and I'm going to bring you my kitchen waste. So that's what we do.
I love your neighbor. Yes, I would definitely applaud for that as well if I weren't holding a microphone. That's really funny. Yeah, so thank you. My views align with that as well. And essentially that process I mentioned, 130 degrees and the turning it every 3 days, the process of that is composting. And the material that results from that process is compost. While I don't think this is like a protected term, bless you, that's essentially what it is. So anything shy of that, technically speaking, isn't really compost, bless you. And those machines, while labeled as composters, they're actually essentially dehydrators. And so what was really funny is a friend of mine who's into kind of a more holistic, I'm losing the word, anyway, like a permaculture approach. He's like, well, so you're going to dehydrate that stuff, and then before you feed it to animals, you got to rehydrate it. Because like those chickens probably don't want the like super bone dry, like reduced moisture stuff. They want something they can actually eat, right? To really get a larger volume of it. So if it's complicated. If it's making more people think about composting and food waste, yippee. But if it's giving people kind of false solutions and it's still an energy intensive thing, and then like my personal thing is, how long is that machine going to last? I'm not trying to throw shade, as the children say. It's really just, if I can have the choice to have, let's say, my coffee made in a French press, which is just a glass vessel, or I can have my choice to make my coffee in a fancy electronic digital machine that I have no way to fix, like I'm at the mercy of that machine. If its components all keep working for 30 years, yippee. If they decide to break down after 5 months, I have a paperweight. So that's kind of my view on that composter thing.
So the perfect compost you're talking about, that's the stuff you would use in a garden. I'm working on planning a vegetable garden with someone. We thought we would compost our table scraps, but what you're saying is that perfect compost, that's for gardening, and the other compost you're referring to, you're just not sending stuff to the landfill, but how can you use that? If you don't get the perfect compost, how can you use that, or do you just like leave it in the yard?
I am so very happy that you asked. So one of the things you're doing, so even if it's not that perfect compost, one of the things that you're doing, even when you throw your apple cores out in the backyard, some of that stuff is going to end up being carried back into the soil, and it's going to add organic material. I don't know if I mentioned this already, but organic material in the soil ideally should be, or I would say maybe the upper range should be like 10% or so, as I understand it. 5% is like a minimum of like a healthy soil. In Florida, our like sandy soils, or at least in Gainesville, have somewhere around 1% organic material. So by allowing your food scraps, your food waste to be touching the soil, you're ensuring that some of that is going to make it into the soil to add organic material. And now actually that's, I think, a pretty good segue. I hope not to bore you with too much detail here, but essentially what happens if we go back to this sort of thing and we talk about the food scraps and the wood waste, the food scraps are nitrogen, a source of nitrogen for the microbes. The wood scraps are a source of carbon for the microbes. So they want a certain ratio. I hate to jump into the ratios too much, because when I first heard about composting and someone's like, oh, it's just ratios, check it out. Then I read like 30-1 or 25-1 or 40-1. I'm like, I have no idea what any of this means. And so that's why I go with the beautiful Jeff method, which is 1 scoop of this, 2 to 3 scoops of that. Done. The secret I'm going to tell you is you're achieving that ratio by doing that. But anyway, so to start the composting process, you want a certain ratio. As the microbes work that material down, the ratio starts to shift. And when you have a finished compost, you have something much closer to the carbon to nitrogen ratio of the soil, which is closer to 8-1. That's like a natural C to N, carbon to nitrogen ratio of the soil. The further your ratio is from the ratio of the soil, is the greater the chance that nitrogen in your soil or near your plants will actually be absorbed by the microbes in your unfinished compost to help continue the decomposition process. That's why people will mature or cure their compost and let it sit for a long time. So what I'm saying is immature compost could actually rob your soil of nitrogen. But what that really means is it's not like it's going anywhere. It's just going to be processed there in the compost process instead of being fed into your plants. I don't see that necessarily as a terrible thing because I don't typically till my compost back into the soil, even if it's that like imperfect stuff. I kind of use it as top dressing / mulch sort of thing. And even then, I generally don't put it like right at the base of right at the roots or at the stem, the trunk. That's the word I'm looking for. But the fun thing is, as you explore this more, as how I got into the composting thing was really just by playing with it and observing. It's a scientific thing that you're doing on your own, and you're seeing, hey, my pile's not getting hot. Well, why is that? Is it big enough? Okay, I got to make it bigger. Well, how can I make it bigger? Add more volume. Well, should I add just the greens? Well, to every one bit of greens, every bit of greens, I got to add 2 to 3 bits of browns. How do I get free browns? How do I get free greens? Like we can talk about all that stuff more. Is the pile too wet? If it's too wet, add more dry. Is the pile too dry? If it's too dry, add more wet. And then as you're seeing your own process going through, as you turn it every so often, you'll eventually start to see something sprouting in it, most likely. I'd say that's a fantastic sign if things are sprouting in your compost because it looks like it's supporting life. So at that point, I would feel very comfortable definitely using it in the garden. But why I brought this here, and actually, maybe because we've all been sitting for a while, this might be a chance to stand up. So if everyone can please just come on up here and you can just make a little line or whatever. And I just want to show you, if you feel like it, you can reach in here and see that this is compost that probably 3 months ago was not only food waste, nasty, stinky, yucky food waste, but was also yard waste, which if we think about, like, that's a material that needs to be handled and needs to be managed and becomes kind of like waste and trash. Think about if you're in a residential area, every week you're putting your stuff out at the curb. You're like, truck, please tuck this away. I have too many leaves and branches and twigs. That's like, it has the potential to be a wasted material. 3 months or so later, this is with a little more active management, but still, if anyone's brave enough, you can touch it, you can smell it. Come closer if you wish. Yeah. So this to me is another example of the waste is not waste until it's wasted. And most of us around the city, around the state, and around the world, we are throwing this valuable material into the garbage.
We're out of time.
So I want to tell you guys a couple of things. I will not impose anything upon you for anything you have to keep, but I have some flyers up here that I want you to consider looking at. Perhaps the most important thing is we have a thing called Compost Celebration Day. That's next Saturday. It's free. We want you to register if you can. There's a flyer for that. There's a thing here that tells you more about composting and tells you how to get the free wire roll from the county. Alachua County will give you a free wire roll to start your own backyard compost. There's a little flyer here that has those hierarchies for the food waste and some of the drop-off spots. And then there's a bigger flyer that has all your curbside residential info. So that's all your recycling, all your yard waste, all your e-waste, and info for our social media stuff, which gives you that pumpkin drop-off info. I'm happy to hang around and take any questions. We can talk about whatever. We can rap, as the children don't say. And thank you guys so much for allowing me to come talk with you today.
Thank you to Matt. That was fantastic. That was more than I ever thought I could learn about compost. No, it's great.
Thank you.